Hey everyone, this is Max, and I want to thank you for joining me in another tutorial video. So this is going to be the 9th video in our Mixamo Maya tutorial series, and the last one of the series. So in the previous videos we've worked with clips, kind of some basic editing for the clips, but now we're going to really bring it all together and work on blending a simple animation sequence together. So I have my I have my start character kind of ready to go, and the time editor open. There'll be a scene file of this kind of all set up and ready to go at the starting point if you want to do that, and then the ending file if you want to compare to what I have. Okay, so what we're going to do to get started is we're going to import our animation clips. One. So we're going to start with our idle. And I'm going to do our walking forward. Now we're going to do our running forward. Okay, and so one thing to point out before we get started is that I did kind of work through this on my own, so if it feels like I'm just knowing exactly where to have my cuts and blends happen, if it looks like I know exactly how long they should blend for, it's because I did a lot of trial and error to kind of figure this out beforehand, just to make the tutorial process a lot smoother. So just keep that in mind. You're going to have to play with stuff, test things out, see what kind of works. Those are really important. The other thing to keep in mind is, remember, when you're trying to blend animations, there's really two things you have to pay attention to. What are the post transitions that are happening, and how much time do I really need to give for that blend to happen? So what we're going to do to get started is we'll mute our first clip, and we'll bring it to about the 72 frame mark. So for a few seconds, we're going to let that idle animation go through. I'm going to switch to our trim tool, and we'll trim that down. And I don't want this to be too long of a hold, but a few seconds I think will feel nice for this. So what we can do now is we can unmute our clips. And now what we're going to do is we're going to bring our walking animation in. Now I found for the walking animation, between walking to idle, about 6 seconds of blending felt pretty good to me. So you can kind of see that transition there. Now one thing I'd say is that because of the way the weight is, I think maybe having it where the walk isn't actually walking forward with the character's left leg, but instead is walking forward with their right leg, might be nice, because we are seeing some foot sliding happening when the character's kind of going to start taking off, which wouldn't be really normal. They would be like more planted on that foot. So again, paying attention to the type of clip, there might need to be some changes or a new idle animation if you're noticing this. But overall, once you've gone through the process, replacing the clips and making new idle animation stuff will go really quickly in comparison to when you're learning it the first time. So don't feel afraid to kind of switch stuff up if it's going to make a big difference with how the final outcome looks. But for now, we're just going to stick with this one and kind of just move forward. It's really not that bad, but there's a little bit of a foot slide there. Alright, so from here what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch over to my looping, and I'm actually going to loop this out to about 152 frames. So I found this to be a good mark for where I want there to be a contact point change in the animation. So one thing you want to take into consideration is when you're transitioning. So I want to be about the point where there's going to be a contact point in the animation where the foot's coming over to touch the ground. That way I can actually consider where are we transitioning from with our other animation. So one thing you could do is you could place cubes or other things to mark the position of this, which can be helpful when kind of looking for where do you want to transition. I'm going to show you another cool tool that they also have when trying to compare the transitioning point as well. So if I wanted to place like a cube, I could grab a cube here and kind of pull it out to right around where that contact point is with the heel. So that way, if I want to compare to kind of where that's at, I can keep this in mind when looking at the other animation. So what we can do now is we're going to want to mute our clip here. So we're just focusing on the run. And again, we have our little marker here so we can see where that's at. We'll kind of pull out our running animation so it goes a little bit past. We can kind of see where that position is happening at. So you can see there's a similar contact point, it's not perfect, around the 24 frame mark. But the only problem is, again, we have to keep into consideration when the legs are targeting. So even though this one is also another option, we'd have to make it so that way the legs are actually at those contact points. So we're going to cut at the 24-second mark. But to be able to keep this to actually hold properly, so it's not just blending from the beginning, we actually have to group this and cut it. So if you see here, if I were to try to blend this right now, and this isn't the exact mark point for the blend, but just an idea, if I were to try to blend this, we could see that the character's moving backwards because they're actually trying to blend with the initial walk or run, which is actually happening at that 0, 0 grid point. So we actually want to make sure that we're kind of fixing this so that way the starting of the run actually happens where we want it to. So that means what we're going to do is we're going to have to group this clip and then cut it. All right, and then what we'll be allowed to do is now take this and actually blend it. And if you want to see how your clips are looking in comparison to where they're at, this is a really cool option here. It's kind of like little kind of like animation kind of bounce through. Will show you where the clip is for the next clip you're actually leading into. So this kind of gives you an idea of where those transitions are, which can be kind of nice. So that way you can actually kind of see what you're looking at, but where the skeletal frame is at. So again, this can be really helpful if you're trying to figure out, is my blend look good? So I think like between marking stuff out with cubes and using this, you should get a pretty good idea of where you need to be blending at. And then for this one, we're going to blend it in to about frame 139. It's about a 13-second blend. And with this being such a quick change, we need more blending for that change to feel natural. So now if we kind of look through how that blend looks, we're going to see kind of a longer stride for that run, and then they're going to start taking off. So again, slower walk, and then in that like stride, we're seeing kind of that push off and an increase in speed, and then the character starts running. So again, I think that looks pretty smooth for blending these types of clips together. And again, I had to mess with this a lot to figure out where that blending needed to take place. What we'll do now is we'll just kind of look through the overall frame and kind of just see what we got and how the overall clip looks like together. And we can delete our cube now because we don't need that. And so our idle to our walk, to our transition to our run. So it runs a little quick in terms of transition, but it makes sense that there's going to be a much faster speed. And again, this really doesn't replace full out character animation. That'll always look a little smoother, but this can be a nice way to kind of work with stuff and blend things together and potentially save some time. Right, if you want to push yourself, one thing I think you could do is try to make it where you go from a run back to a walk, back to an idle. If you want to see how far you can push yourself, kind of making a full on kind of movement, and then also blending with clips where they're kind of idling in place can be another thing to kind of test out. And it might even be a little bit easier because you're not trying to match positionings as much, but more just contact points. Alright, so I hope this video series was helpful and that using these tools and kind of working with these Mixamo animations will be easy to go forward from here on your own projects. If it was helpful, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe for future tutorial series that I'll be posting. And if you do have any questions or you feel stuck, let me know in the comments and I can try to see what I can do to help out with that in the future. All right, I hope everyone has a great day and I'll see you in the next video series. Make sure you subscribe for future content and follow me on the social platforms linked below.